Good morning, everybody. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you're watching. Hi, it's Financial Literacy Month, April, and we're looking at a lot of different ways to talk about personal finance. And hey, I'm Renita Young. This is Your Money Story. And so the one thing that has been on a lot of people's minds, obviously, has been the student loan debt. Right now, we're at around $1.75 trillion of student loan debt in the United States of America. That's according to the most recent NerdWallet estimate. And so there are so many different ways to fund college and several different ways to pay back college loans and several different philosophies on college loan debt. A lot of people have been calling for the president to release everyone of their college loan debt. And some people have reasons why that may not happen, or they believe that they may not fix some of the systemic issues. And so to dig into the college lending process, I invited Manu Smadja. He is the CEO and co-founder of Empower Financing, which is a college lender. And so let me grab him right now. Hang on. Manu, you should see your request right now, and here we go. I think you're coming up really shortly. Hi, Manu. Did you get that request to come in? Okay, I'm going to invite you in one more time. Live, folks. Empower Financing should be joining us very shortly. If not, I will try it one more time. Manu, let me know if you can join in. If you could put it in the comment section. Oh, it says you're unable to join. So I think that you may need to request to join. And okay, I'll give you a couple of minutes. So some background on Manu from Empower Financing is that he grew up in France. And so one of his issues is that he had trouble finding lending as an international student living in the United States, finding lending for college. And so did his sister. Had unique issues with not having a credit history and trying to apply for loans, or even trying to apply to get an apartment. And so we're going to hear about that and more. And I see that Manu is joining now. So great. I just accepted it. It should work.
Hi, Renita. How are you?
How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Really sorry. I discovered the hard way that the desktop app for Instagram doesn't quite work well.
Right, it does not. But you know what? They should allow us to do live videos on our desktop. It's a lot of different third-party streamers that we could get to do that. But I don't know. One day, maybe, hey, Instagram, if you're listening, enable desktop video. It'll make for some better quality videos. But thank you so much for joining me, Manu, from DC. Appreciate your time. This is Your Money Story. And that's what we start out with. I was giving folks just a quick briefer on who you are. You grew up in France, and you came to the United States to study at in Virginia, the University of Virginia, right? But take us back to the days growing up in France. What was your relationship with money like growing up?
One is I didn't have much money growing up in France. So I think one is a little bit ignorant about it. There is no credit system in France. Certainly wasn't then. I think it's building up a little bit now. But are you able to hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
I think some people cannot, but folks,
Okay.
Can you all hear us? Can someone let us know if you can hear us? because one person said that they cannot hear, and I want to make sure they can hear.
There's a lot of hearts going around, so I'm
I,
guessing at least
I'm
some
guessing they
people.
can hear
Yeah.
us. Okay, great. We have more people saying yes. So go right ahead. Keep telling us your story.
Sure, sure. So grew up in France, not a whole lot of money, and pretty ignorant also about the credit system. And in France, by the way, there is no such thing as credit bureaus. There's no centralized sort of credit bureau like Experian, TransUnion, etc. So
Mm-hmm.
building credit isn't a theme. There were no credit cards per se. When the French use the word credit card, they really mean a debit card. And even to this day, it's rare to have a credit card. So a lot of fintechs are innovating. A lot of banks have added sort of credit lines to their debit cards and so on. But I guess it's a long-winded way of saying that I grew up sort of not knowing a whole lot about personal finance in general and about credit in particular. So coming to the US, it was sort of like, wow, what is this credit card? What is this credit system? I didn't have a credit identity in the US. So like the 50 million immigrants plus that live in this country, when you arrive here, whatever credit you may have overseas does not get transplanted over. So you're starting from scratch.
Okay. That is so interesting. So I have to know, when you came to the US for the first time, you were going to college. As you well know, and as a lot of a lot of times the first person you meet on a college campus is a credit card company who offers you a credit card. Like, did that happen to you? And what kind of questions did you have for them?
So yeah, I was always intrigued by these credit card companies offering T-shirts on campus, and my
Yeah.
classmates sort of following the crowd there. I wasn't even eligible for that because what happens is, again, as an immigrant, when you come to the U.S., oftentimes you're left out even of credit card products, and to some extent, that you know some of the credit card products is probably a good thing that I didn't have access to them
Probably.
because the rates are terrible, and given that I didn't know much about credit, it was probably for the better. But in other cases, you actually do need one. So what I had to do eventually to build credit in the US, to get a credit card, is to get a secured credit card, which for people who have that, they know that essentially you send $200 or $300 over to the credit card company, and then you can use credit against that balance, which is
Mm.
a little odd, right? If you need a credit card, it means you need the money. If you need the money, why in the world would you send $300? Now, there are, innovative companies like Nova and American Express have innovated in this space. Deserve is another one that have created sort of no cosigner credit cards or starter credit cards that don't require a deposit. So unsecured credit cards, if you will.
Okay.
But
More
that didn't
interesting
exist
to
then.
know. That makes sense. And so I want to dig in a little bit more about this financing process for financing college. As you know, the U.S. has, people in the U.S. have about $1.75 trillion in college loan debt. But one of the things you talk about is how, that issue starts in how people are eligible, how people become eligible to get college loans in the first place, right? So can you just peel back the onion and take us through the science behind the student lending process? What I know is that, because I went through the process, you start out by filling out your FAFSA, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then how is the amount determined for people, and what other eligibility criteria is considered?
Sure. And I might caveat by saying that I'm by no means an expert in domestic student loans or federal student loans, which the federal student loans essentially comprise 75% of the market today. So if you're an American citizen or green card holder and you're borrowing for school, you're filling out the FAFSA, etc., the aid you'll get is usually the first line of defense, if you will, is a federal loan. So it's managed by the Department of Education, or it's granted rather by the Department of Education and managed through third-party companies like Navient, for instance, that you might see in the press very often. So my area of expertise is a little different in that it's an international or an immigrant student loans. Empower focuses on international student loans, DACA student loans, TPS student loans, and independent American students without a cosigner. Now, but so with that caveat, I will do my best to answer your question, which
Okay.
is when when the Department of Education looks at your package, they will provide you with a student loan, and the way they look at that is there's subsidized and unsubsidized student loans. Typically, there's not a whole lot of a credit check, certainly not a whole lot of a parental credit check for some of these. And what also happens is at the graduate level, there's usually no ceiling on how much you can borrow with the Department of Education, which we can go into a bit later is actually a problem in given that you can actually study for a degree that doesn't offer gainful employment, but still take $100,000 or $200,000 loan for that degree. So that's on the federal student loan side. On the private student loan side, so Sallie Mae, Wells Fargo, Citizens, etc., what they'll typically do, right? And I don't think that's how they'll say it, but the dirty truth about that industry is they will look at mom and dad's credit history. They look at your cosigner. You as a student don't have an established credit history. Whether you're an American citizen or an immigrant, you typically at the age of 17, 18, 19, 20, you don't have a whole lot of credit. And so they're really underwriting your parents, and they're not looking at a whole lot of data. They're not banks. Traditional banks are not big data companies. They look at FICO bands. What is mom and dad's FICO score? And based on that, I will lend to you $100,000, $50,000, and so on. So if you come from a fairly wealthy background and your parents are somewhat established, you will get a big loan. If you don't have that kind of background, well, you're stuck with your federal student loan options and a few other options in the market, like Empower, that doesn't require a cosigner, or like Ascent Student Loans, which is another great provider.
So you said that this is like a broken system, and I can see now how you talk about how it's shut out a lot of talented people. What have been some of the ripple effects of this?
Well, I think the $1 trillion sort of student debt bubble is one of them. I think what that means at the individual level is two things. There's the people who are in the system and suffering from it, and there's the people who are left out. And Empower tries to help the people who are left out while also providing a solution that can be imitated by the federal government or by private student lenders to help those who are in the system. So it might sound a bit complex. Let me explain. Sure. So what we do is we make loans based on students' potential. So whether we're assessing an American citizen, a green card holder, an international student, a DACA student, TPS student, what we do is we look at education information, employment information, and so on, and we try to underwrite their future. What is this student studying? Can they afford what they're borrowing? And if there's a match between the amount they're borrowing and the return on investment through their degree, like we see there's a high placement score, there's high demand in the market for their skill set after they graduate, we can grant the loan. If we see there's a mismatch, we'll say, this is not, there's a misalignment here. You're going to over borrow for a degree that may not yield the results you'd like from it. In which case, we're not doing you a favor if we underwrite this loan. And we think more of that is needed to solve the first problem, which is sort of the federal government one, which is a lot of this $1 trillion debt bubble got created because the federal government and some private student lenders were providing loans that weren't at all matched to the outcomes of the student. Someone studying art history, and I don't mean to pick on art history, but just as one example, and borrowing $100,000
may not be the best idea, huh?
That's correct. And by the way, it's not just art history. I've spoken to students who are in tears on the phone. There's this one student who had borrowed $200,000 to go to medical school in the Caribbean. And candidly, there was societal pressures for this student to become a doctor. Mom and dad, took a lot of pride in that. But when you looked at the student's profile, it probably shouldn't have been a doctor. There's a lot of other jobs that maybe would have been less glamorous in his eyes or the eyes of his parents, but that would have paid equally well. And so what happened is he was a C student in medical school, probably worked hard still, but just wasn't there. When he graduated, he didn't match to residency. And then he thought, well, maybe I can do this online MBA program, right? And so got $100,000 from the federal government. So then he ends up with $300,000, and he's looking for a job as sort of an entry-level nurse. And God knows we need nurses, but that's going to be a whole lot of hardship in order to pay that money back.
Yeah. It is. And so what on that note though, when you talk about looking at the career choice of the student, in relation to how much you're willing to loan them, um, does Empower offer career counseling for the students who do have a misalignment?
Absolutely. So we, different from a traditional bank, we see ourselves less as a lender and more as an investor in someone's future.
Hmm.
And by that, we're very different from, the income sharing agreement. So we don't take a share of someone's future income. We very much give a standard loan. But what I mean by an investment in the person's future is that if they're successful, we're successful. So we help review resumes. We do mock interviews, all this for free, by the way. We help international and DACA students navigate the very complex immigration landscape and laws and the visa processes that are in the US. We'll even work with them if they want to relocate to Canada as an international student afterwards. If it's easier to get a job there, we'll help them with that. So again, we see our role as not just providing the money for their education, but ensuring that that money leads to a great outcome professionally and that they're successful from then on. And that's just part of our duty as a B Corp.
That's definitely something different that I've heard from traditional lenders, whether it's a bank or some of the other organizations that give private loans out. And folks, I do want to remind you, I see a lot of people saying, I have a question, go on ahead and drop it in the comments and we'll read it for you. And so that's why this part of this is why you say that traditional lending systems, they're obviously not effective anymore. But you also say this, and I don't know how people are gonna take this, but you said that forgiving student debt is a short-term solution, and it won't solve those larger systemic issues that we just talked about. So why do you say it's a short-term solution, and how won't it help solve? Is that really what people are looking for it to solve? I don't I don't
It's
think
fair.
so, but
It's fair. I think it's a band-aid. So I'm not saying, hey, it's not worth doing, but I think it's avoiding the broader issue in a way. So a few stats that may help understand sort of this conversation around forgiving student debt, right? That's going on in DC, coincidentally, where I'm based.
right.
When there's talk about forgiving student debt, what the federal government really means is forgiving federal student loans. So your Sallie Mae loan, Wells Fargo loan, Citizens loan stays there, right? So that's the first distinction I would say. And then I would also say that for a good number of students, they can afford to pay back the loans, right? So it's, do you need to forgive student loans, or do you need to forgive student loans for targeted students who didn't get a degree that's yielding results? Right, who were sort of like lured into a program that just didn't result in gainful employment, right? So are there more targeted ways of doing it? And the reason I say that is part of this idea around forgiving student loans is, to me, there's no free lunch, right? There's no free tuition. Someone is paying for it. And who's paying for it? It could be the 60% of Americans who aren't going to college or finishing very shortly after a year or a portion of their degree. It could be your parents. It could be retirees. So it's other taxpayers. So there's no, again, someone is paying for that degree. So this idea of just simply forgiving it is appealing, but I don't think it solves the issue. It just shifts the burden to someone else.
Now, a lot of people will have a lot to say about that. Now, so when you talk about who should get forgiveness and who shouldn't, I'm going to throw a caveat out there. Not a caveat, but like, I don't know, throw you a curveball. What about the six-figure earner who got an advanced degree, perhaps, or they went to a private university that was more expensive, and they earn six figures, but they have this debt from this promise of an education that they definitely did take advantage of. However, they might live in a high cost of living state, or just things like that. So there are a lot of people. What people don't always talk about is that there's, I believe, a much larger proportion of people who have six-figure student loan debt and six-figure salaries than we would like to believe. And so I'm just wondering, like, what are your thoughts on that? A lot of people, that's just one example, but a lot of people would like to limit student loan forgiveness to low income earners.
Yeah, I think there's probably a sequence or prioritization that one can do. So the federal government, like I said, it's a trade-off, right? You're using taxpayer money as a whole, right? Society as a whole is sort of subsidizing, different groups. And so probably the priority group is those who didn't graduate, right? Who took student loans, they were lured into a private degree program and they didn't graduate, or the degree they got was essentially worthless, right? Think of like Corinthian students who got their whole tuition or their whole debt forgiven for right reason. They got lured into by the marketing team at Corinthian and got a degree that didn't result in anything, right? I forget what it was, but in nursing, I think they never practiced on anyone real. They were practicing on dolls, like some crazy stories. And so those would be probably the number one priority. And then for the six-figure students who borrowed big amounts but are now maybe earning six figures as a doctor,
Mm-hmm.
or an MBA, or working at a law firm, I think in those cases, they probably have over their lifetime the ability to pay the loan back, but what they're facing is initial hardship. What I have an issue with in student lending also is, in reality, repayment should be almost like a staircase. As you go up in life, your payment should match it, versus expecting that it's linear. Like, your income is not linear. Like, thankfully, people typically make more in their 40s than they did in their 30s than they did in their 20s. Why are student loans still sort of requiring the same payment throughout? So I think
Well, many of them don't, for the federal loans, at least. For some of the payment plans that they offer, it is like a graduated payment plan.
like the income-based repayment is what you're
Income-based
saying.
repayment.
And I think that's a great initiative. And I think that's something that more private student lenders could adopt as well. So I think that is a great initiative, and it's a step in the right direction. And I think that's probably a better solution than a complete forgiveness. It's sort of like pay back what you can.
Okay. So we're wrapping up right now, and I want people to understand how Empower helps empower students after they graduate to pay back their loan debt.
Sure. And like I said, for us, it's a whole process. So it starts by making a loan that is based on your future earning potential. So making sure that there is a match between your earning power after graduation and the loan size. So from the start, you don't end up having a ton of debt with a job that doesn't match up to that debt. And then we have fairly flexible payments. So while in school, you're making small interest-only payments so that you build your credit history, so that you don't accumulate interest on top of interest, which is another issue in traditional student lending. When you graduate, you have 6 months again to get settled into the job, to start getting your first paychecks. And again, during that time, you continue making interest-only payments. If at any point in time you find yourself in a bind, you needed more time to get a job, you took a job and then there was some visa issue, you need to switch to another job, we have fairly generous forbearance options that allow you to continue either making touch payments or no payments for a period of time. So those are some of the ways that we help on the relief end. And then again, we are really invested in you and your future. So again, we help with career services, meaning preparing you for networking. A lot of international students or immigrants don't have this concept of this American concept really of networking to get a job. We prepare you for resume reviews. We prepare you for mock interviews. We work with immigration offices that can give you some initial guidance for free on the visa process for the US, the H-1B, so the work visa, or what it's like to get permanent residency in Canada, for instance. So those are some of the ways in which we help students.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I learned a lot. And folks, if you want to learn more about Empower Financing Services and Manu, go ahead and head on over to Empower Financing's page, where you'll find a link to all of the links. And make sure you join Your Money Story next week at 10:30 Eastern on Wednesday for another great conversation with another personal finance Influencer. Wow. Manu, thank you so much for joining. You have a great day and enjoy DC weather today. It's nicer out there. Nicer.
Well, we'll do, Anita. Yes, spring is finally here. Thank you so
Yes.
much.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye
Bye bye.
bye.